The year is 2012. The city is Chicago. The restaurant is Alinea, a place where food is not just cooked. It is deconstructed, reimagined. Chef Grant Achatz looks at a menu proof. His eyes scan the lines of text. Kona Kampachi, Osetra Caviar, Steelhead Roe, all familiar. Then his eyes stop. They stop on a single line under the bread course. The line reads, Single Origin Red Fife Sourdough, from Gallo Family Farms. He says nothing for a moment. The silence in that kitchen is heavy. It is a silence more profound than noise. He turns to his head baker, a man who has worked with flour his entire life. Where did you find this? The baker nods toward a small, unassuming paper bag. A farmer's market find. A guy drove down from Wisconsin, just to see if we'd be interested. Achatz walks to the bag. He opens it. He runs the dark, reddish flour through his fingers. The texture is different, coarser, more alive. He brings a pinch to his nose. It smells of nuts, of spice, of the earth it came from. He looks back at the menu proof. He takes a pen from his pocket. He crosses out the existing description. He writes a new one. The baker leans in to read it. Heritage Red Fife Sourdough, from Leo Gallo's own hands. Then the chef looks at his procurement manager. Call this farmer. Tell him we want all of it. I don't care what it costs. Triple the standing order. And get me his story. The name Gallo felt important. It felt like it had weight. But Leo Gallo was not a name known to the world of high finance, or commodity trading, or agricultural policy. In fact, just 5 years earlier, in 2007, that name meant almost nothing. It meant a struggling farm. It meant a man who was told his work was worthless. Not just worthless, a liability, a waste of fuel, a crop not even worth the truck ride to the grain elevator. This channel tells the stories of people like Leo Gallo, the ones who were counted out, the ones who were told they couldn't, the ones who were dismissed by the gatekeepers. We believe these stories are the most important stories there are. They are stories of quiet rebellion, of proving the world wrong, not with speeches, but with decades of work. If you believe these stories matter, if you want to hear about the people who build legacies in the dirt, subscribe to this channel. Because the story of Leo Gallo is not just about wheat. It's about the quietest, most devastating way to win. Let me tell you how it began. It began with a death and a discovery. In the winter of 2006, Leo Gallo's father passed away. He left behind a 320-acre farm in southern Wisconsin, and he left behind debt. Not crushing debt, but the quiet, grinding kind. An operating loan for the new combine, a note on the seed and fertilizer for next season, the kind of debt that every farmer knows, the kind that keeps you running on a treadmill, planting what the co-op tells you to plant, selling at the price they tell you to take. Leo was 34 years old. He had worked this land his whole life, but he had never owned it. Now it was his, the land, and the debt. He spent that winter in the farmhouse, going through his father's papers, ledgers, tax documents, warranties for equipment, the paper trail of a farmer's life. In the back of a closet, inside a dusty wooden chest, he found something else. He found his grandfather's things. Giuseppe Gallo, the man who came from Italy in 1919, the man who bought this land. Cash. Inside the chest were old photographs, a rosary, a pipe, and a small hand-stitched leather pouch. It was tied with a faded cord. Leo opened it. Inside was a handful of wheat kernels. They were unlike any wheat he had ever seen. They were not the pale, uniform seeds of modern commodity wheat. These were dark, reddish-brown, and they were not uniform at all. Some were long, some were plump. Tucked inside the pouch was a small, folded piece of paper. The ink was faded. The handwriting was his grandfather's. It read, Grano Rosso, Red Fife, the good seed, from the old country. The land remembers the good seed. Leo held the seeds in his palm. There was maybe half a pound, not enough to plant a field, barely enough to plant a garden. That phrase stuck in his head. The land remembers the good seed. He looked out the window at the snow-covered fields that had been planted with hybrid corn and GMO soybeans for 50 years, fields that were fed a precise diet of synthetic nitrogen and phosphate. He wondered if the land remembered anything at all. The idea was small at first, a curiosity. What if he planted them? Just to see. He spent the rest of the winter reading. He went to the library. He used the slow dial-up internet at the farmhouse. He learned about Red Fife wheat, a landrace grain, brought to North America in the 1840s, the backbone of the bread that fed the pioneers. It was tall. It was hardy. It could choke out weeds, but its yields were lower than modern varieties, much lower. And it matured later. It had been replaced, engineered out of existence, pushed aside for crops that produced more bushels per acre, more dollars per square foot. It was a relic, a ghost from a forgotten time. But the book said something else, too. They said the flavor was extraordinary, complex, nutty. They said the protein was different, more digestible, better for baking. The idea grew. It changed from a curiosity to a plan, a desperate plan. He would take 1 acre, just one, the acre behind the old barn, the one his father always called the poor acre, because the soil was thin. He would plant his grandfather's seeds. He would see what happened. It was a foolish idea. He knew that. His neighbors would think he was crazy. The bank would question his judgment. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was tired of the treadmill, tired of planting what he was told, tired of being a price taker, not a price maker. That spring, in April of 2007, he prepared the single acre. He didn't use the big John Deere tractor. He used his grandfather's old Alice Chalmers Model G, a tiny, strange-looking machine with the engine in the back. He tilled the soil, and he planted the half-pound of seeds, by hand. He walked the acre, broadcasting the seed just like his grandfather would have. He felt foolish. He felt hopeful. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he was planting something that was his. The wheat grew. It grew slowly at first, then it shot up. By July, it was taller than any wheat he had ever seen. It was almost as tall as he was. The wind in the tall red stalks made a different sound, a deeper sound, a whisper. His neighbors drove by and slowed down. They looked at the strange, tall patch of grain behind the barn. They shook their heads. What's Leo doing? That's not going to yield anything. Wasting good land on that weed. He ignored them. He spent that summer watching the wheat. He learned its rhythms. He learned that it didn't need the pesticides the other fields did. The tall stalks created a canopy that shaded out the weeds. It was a self-sufficient system, a closed loop. In late August, the heads of grain were heavy. They were a deep, beautiful auburn color. He knew he couldn't harvest it with the combine. The modern machine was too aggressive. It would shatter the delicate heritage kernels. So he bought an old sickle bar mower at a farm auction for $50, cash. He spent 3 days cutting the acre of wheat, walking behind the mower, the sun on his back. The work was slow. It was brutal. He then had to find a way to thresh it, to separate the grain from the stalk. He found an old thresher from the 1940s sitting in a neighbor's fence row, rusted out. The farmer said he could have it for scrap value. Leo spent a week taking it apart, cleaning it, welding broken parts, fabricating new ones from sheet metal. He got it working. When it was all done, after all the work, the 1 acre had yielded 800 pounds of red Fife wheat. A modern acre would have yielded 4,000 pounds. By any conventional measure, it was a failure. A complete and total failure. But Leo didn't feel like a failure. He stood by the pile of dark red grain. He ran his hands through it. He had done it. He had brought his grandfather's seed back to life. Now he had to see if it was worth anything. He cleaned a sample, put about 20 pounds in a burlap sack. He loaded it into his old Ford pickup, and he drove the 12 miles to the town co-op. The grain elevator stood like a cathedral in the small town, a monument to modern agriculture. He walked into the office. The air smelled of dust and diesel. Frank Miller sat behind the desk. Frank had been the grain buyer here for 30 years. He was a pillar of the community, served on the church board, coached Little League. He was a decent man, a fair man. He knew Leo's father well. He had known Leo since he was a boy. Frank smiled warmly. "Leo, good to see you. What can I do for you?" Leo set the burlap sack on the counter. "I've got a sample here, Frank. I was wondering if you'd be interested." Frank's smile tightened just a little. "A sample of what?" "You're not due to harvest for another month." "It's something different," Leo said. He opened the sack. Frank peered inside. He frowned. He reached in and took a handful of the grain. He rolled the kernels in his palm. "What in the world is this?" "It's red Fife, an heirloom wheat." Frank looked up from the grain. He looked at Leo. There was no malice in his eyes. There was something else. Concern. Pity. "Leo," he said, his voice soft, "where did you get this?" "It was my grandfather's. I planted an acre." Frank let out a long, slow sigh. He let the kernels fall from his hand back into the sack. He wiped the dust on his jeans. "Son," he said, and that word, son, landed like a stone. It was the word of a man who believes he knows better. A man who believes he is helping. "I can't buy this." Leo felt his stomach tighten. "Why not?" Frank leaned forward on the counter. He decided to explain it. Gently, patiently, like he was talking to a child. "First, the yield is no good. You told me you planted 1 acre? You probably got what, less than 1,000 pounds? I need 40,000 pounds just to fill 1 truck. Second, the test weight is all wrong. It's too light. It won't grade out. Third, and this is the most important part, the mills won't take it. They're calibrated for modern hard red winter wheat. This stuff has different protein, different gluten. It'll clog up their machines. They'd have to shut down the line to clean it. They're not going to do that for one farmer's hobby crop." He paused. He let the facts settle in the air. Leo just stood there. Frank softened his voice even more. "Look, Leo, I know you're going through a lot, with your dad and all. I knew him a long time. He was a good farmer, a practical farmer. He wouldn't want you wasting your time on this, on something that has no market. I'm trying to protect you. I'm not going to be the man who encourages you to go broke chasing a fantasy. Go home, plow that stuff under, get your seed order in for the commodity wheat. Do what works." There was a long silence. Leo looked at the sack of grain on the counter. His grain, his grandfather's grain. He looked at Frank. A good man, a decent man, a man who was absolutely certain. And that certainty was a wall. It was a wall made of kindness, a wall you couldn't fight with anger, a wall you couldn't tear down with arguments. It could only be disproven. So, you're saying it's worthless? Leo's voice was quiet. Frank shook his head slowly. I'm not saying it's worthless, son. I'm saying it's not worth anything to us. There's no system for it. There's no buyer for it. Frankly, it's not worth the fuel for the truck to haul it out of your yard. That was the line. Not worth the truck ride. Leo nodded slowly. He picked up the burlap sack. It felt heavier now. He turned and walked out of the office. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked out. He drove the 12 miles home in silence. The refusal echoed in his head. Not with anger, but with a quiet, devastating finality. He had been dismissed. Kindly, politely, and completely. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by someone who thought they were protecting you. Someone who laid out all the reasonable, logical reasons why you would fail. Someone who wrapped their doubt in a blanket of concern. That is the loneliest kind of opposition there is, because it forces you to question yourself. Drop a comment and tell us about a time you had to prove a kind person wrong. Because what Leo Gallo did next was not about anger. It was about a quiet, unshakable belief in something the system had forgotten. He got back to the farm. He didn't go into the house. He went to the old workshop, the place where he had rebuilt the thresher. He sat on a stool. He stared at the pile of 800 pounds of red fife wheat. Worthless, not worth the truck ride. He thought about his father. He thought about the debt. He thought about the logic in Frank's words. The logic was undeniable. The system was not built for this. He should quit. He should plow it under. He should get back on the treadmill. It would be easier. It would be safer. Then he remembered the note in the leather pouch. The land remembers the good seed. His grandfather didn't write, "The market remembers." He didn't write, "The co-op remembers." He wrote, "The land remembers." It was a different kind of value, a different kind of truth. Leo stood up. He made a decision. It was not a loud, dramatic decision. It was a quiet, firm resolve that settled deep in his bones. If the system won't buy my wheat, he thought, then I will bypass the system. If the mills won't grind it, I will grind it myself. If the bakeries won't bake with it, I will bake with it myself. He would not sell the grain. He would sell what the grain could become. The next day he drove to a farm auction 2 counties over. He had heard about a piece of equipment for sale. It was a small Stoneburr mill, a Meadows 8-inch model. It was old, from the 1950s. It had been used to grind corn for cattle feed. The auctioneer started the bidding at $100. Nobody bid. It was a relic, useless in the modern world. Leo raised his hand. $100, going once, going twice. Sold for $100, cash. He brought it home. He took it apart, bolt by bolt. He cleaned the stones. He replaced the motor. He built a new frame for it out of white oak from his woodlot. 2 weeks later, he had a working mill. He poured the first scoop of red fife into the hopper. He flipped the switch. The stones began to turn, and out of the chute came a stream of dark, fragrant, living flour. It was nothing like the pale, sterile flour from the grocery store. This was alive. Now he had to learn to bake. He knew nothing about baking bread. He had only eaten it. He bought books. He read about sourdough starters, about fermentation, about hydration levels. His first loaves were bricks, dense, sour, inedible. He failed, and failed again. The community was watching. The talk at the local diner was about Leo Gallo. Heard he's trying to be a baker now. Poor guy's lost his mind since his dad died. That farm will be up for sale by next year. The doubt was a constant pressure, but there were allies, quiet ones. One afternoon, an old woman named Elena Rossi knocked on his door. She was the widow of the town's best baker, who had died years ago. She held a small glass jar in her hands. Inside was a bubbling, active sourdough starter. "My husband started this from a handful of grapes from his father's village in Sicily. It is 70 years old." She pushed the jar into his hands. "He would have wanted you to have it," she said. He tried to thank her. She just shook her head. "Don't talk. Bake." That was the turning point. The starter was magic. It loved the red fife flour. It understood it. His bread began to change. It became light. The crust became crisp and caramelized. The crumb became open and soft. The flavor was like nothing he had ever tasted. It was sweet and savory and sour all at once. It tasted of the land. By the spring of 2008, he had perfected his recipe. He was ready. He wasn't going back to the co-op. He was going to the people. He loaded the back of his pickup with 20 loaves of bread, still warm from the oven he had built in the old smokehouse. He drove to the Dane County Farmers Market in Madison, the largest producer-only market in the country. He paid the fee for a small stall, $25, cash. He set up a simple wooden table. He put out a sign he had painted himself, "Gallo Family Farm, Heritage Red Fife Sourdough, $8 a loaf." People walked by. They looked at the price. $8 for a loaf of bread? Are you crazy? The bakery sells bread for $3. He just smiled. He had a cutting board and a knife. He offered samples. A woman in a chef's coat stopped. She tried a piece. Her eyes went wide. She bought 4 loaves. A man who wrote a food blog tried a piece. He started asking questions. What is red fife? Why does it taste like this? Leo told him the story of his grandfather, the seeds in the pouch, the refusal at the co-op. The blog post went up that Sunday night. It was titled, "The best bread in Wisconsin is being baked in a farmhouse." The next Saturday, there was a line at his stall before the market even opened. He sold out in an hour. He had brought 40 loaves. He needed more. This is where the story begins to accelerate. Let me tell you about the next 5 years. The fall of 2008. Leo took the money from the farmer's market. He didn't pay down the bank loan. He bought more seed. He found a small heritage grain supplier in Canada. He bought 50 pounds of certified red fife, cash. He planted 10 acres, not 1, 10. The spring of 2009. His bread was now famous at the market. Local restaurants started calling. They didn't want his bread. They wanted his flour. They wanted to put Gallo Red Fife on their menus. He started selling 50-pound bags of flour for $100 a bag, a price that was 5 times the commodity rate, and they paid it, gladly. The fall of 2009. He harvested the 10 acres. He had to buy a bigger mower, an old New Holland pull-behind, cash. He had to upgrade his mill. He bought a second set of stones, cash. He was making a profit, a real profit. For the first time in his life, the farm was not just surviving, it was thriving. Frank Miller, the grain buyer at the co-op, drove past Leo's farm sometimes. He saw the 10 acres of tall, red wheat. He heard the talk in town. He saw Leo's old pickup loaded with bags of flour heading towards Madison. He felt something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't regret, not yet. It was confusion. The numbers didn't make sense to him. The system didn't work this way. The year is 2010. Leo paid off his father's operating loan, the entire thing, in a single check. The banker looked at him, stunned. Then Leo bought the 80 acres of land that bordered his farm to the north. The farmer was retiring. He wanted to sell to Leo. Leo paid him his asking price, cash. He planted all 80 acres in Red Fife. He bought a new, larger stone mill, a 20-inch model from a company in Vermont. It cost $30,000, cash. He hired his first employee, a young man from town who was interested in organic farming. The year is 2011. A writer from a national food magazine came to the farm. She spent a week with Leo. She documented the whole process, the planting, the milling, the baking. The article came out that fall. It was a 6-page spread with beautiful, sun-drenched photos of the tall red wheat. The headline was simple: "The Farmer Who Said No." The phone started ringing. It didn't stop. Chefs from New York, from San Francisco, from Chicago, they all wanted his flour. They didn't ask the price. They just asked how soon they could get it. He was now selling flour for 10 times the commodity price, and he had a waiting list. The year is 2012. This brings us back to that kitchen in Chicago, to Chef Grant Achatz holding the menu proof, to the order for triple what Leo could possibly supply. Leo Gallo had not just bypassed the system. He had created a new one. A system based not on yield, but on flavor. Not on efficiency, but on story. Not on commodity, but on identity. He had proven that the single most valuable ingredient was the one that couldn't be measured by the co-op's scales: authenticity. But that's not the end of the story, because the old system was still there, and it was watching, and it was beginning to understand. The fall of 2013 was a hard one for commodity farmers in Wisconsin. Corn prices fell through the floor. Soybean yields were down because of a wet spring. The co-op was struggling. The big grain elevators that had once seemed like cathedrals now seemed like tombs, full of grain that was losing value every day. Frank Miller was 62 years old now. His hair was grayer. His warm smile was tired. The board of the co-op held an emergency meeting. They needed a new revenue stream, something high value, something that wasn't tied to the Chicago Board of Trade. Someone mentioned Leo Gallo. The name hung in the air. The farmer they had all dismissed, the one they had called crazy, was now the most successful farmer in the county, maybe the state. The board made a decision. Frank was the one who had the relationship with the Gallo family. Frank was the one who had to go ask. Ask Leo Gallo to save them. Frank dreaded the drive. He drove the 12 miles out to the Gallo farm. The place was transformed. The old farmhouse was restored. A new, large building stood where the poor acre behind the barn used to be. The sign on it read, Gallo Family Mills. There was a new grain silo, not a massive concrete one, but a smaller, gleaming steel one, designed for specialty grains. Frank parked his truck. He felt small. He felt old. He walked into the office. Leo was behind a simple wooden desk. He looked up when Frank came in. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. His face was calm, patient. He looked like a man who had been expecting this visit for a long time. "Frank," Leo said, his voice even. "Leo, thanks for seeing me." Frank stood there, holding his hat in his hands. He felt like he was the one with the burlap sack now, the one with something to prove. "I'll get right to it," he said. "The co-op is in a tough spot. The board, we were wondering if you would consider selling some of your wheat to us. We want to create a specialty line, an identity-preserved brand. We could market it. We have the trucks, the infrastructure. We could get you a good price." Frank's voice trailed off. The offer sounded hollow even to his own ears. Leo listened. He didn't interrupt. He just listened until Frank was finished. The silence that followed was long. It was not an angry silence. It was a factual silence, like the space between two numbers in a ledger. Then Leo spoke. His voice was not triumphant. It was not gloating. It was quiet and devastating. "You told me it wasn't worth the truck ride, Frank." Frank flinched. He remembered the words exactly. Leo continued. "So I found people who thought it was. I have contracts, Frank. I have a waiting list of over 50 bakeries and restaurants. My entire harvest for next year is already sold. And the year after that. I have a responsibility to them. They were the ones who believed in this when no one else did. They are my system." There was another silence. Frank looked down at the floor. There was nothing to say. Leo had not yelled. He had not accused. He had simply stated the truth. He had built his own world, and in this world, the co-op had no place. "I'm sorry, Frank," Leo said. "I can't help you." Frank nodded. He understood. He turned and walked out. As he got to the door, Leo said one more thing. "Frank." Frank turned back. "It was never about the wheat, was it? It was about you being certain. You were so certain about what was possible and what wasn't. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind." Leo's voice trailed off. "That's the loneliest work there is." Frank Miller got in his truck. He drove away. He finally had a name for the feeling he had been having for years. It wasn't confusion. It was the cold, hard certainty of being wrong. The quiet devastation of knowing he had been the gatekeeper. And the gate he had closed was not on a crop. It was on a future he couldn't imagine. Leo Gallo's story does not end there. Because a true legacy is not what you build for yourself, it's what you build for others. In 2015, Leo and his wife started the Good Seed Foundation. They used the profits from the mill to fund it. The foundation gives grants to young farmers, not loans, grants. Grants for farmers who want to grow heirloom corn, or heritage breed pigs, or forgotten varieties of apples. The first grant was for $5,000. It went to a young woman in Iowa who wanted to grow a rare blue corn. The co-op told her it wouldn't sell. By 2020, the foundation was giving out $500,000 a year. It has helped launch over 60 small, independent farms. Farms that are building their own systems, just like Leo did. Gallo Family Mills continued to grow. His 2 children, after college, came home to the farm. His daughter now runs the milling operation. She has a degree in food science. She is working with universities to catalog the properties of hundreds of heirloom grains. His son runs the business side. He manages the contracts, the logistics. He's the one who deals with the chefs in New York and Chicago. The farm is now over 2,000 acres, all of it certified organic. All of it bought with money they earned. All of it bought with cash. They don't just grow red fife anymore. They grow Turkey Red and Marquis and Sonora, a library of forgotten flavors. And in the main office of Gallo Family Mills, there is a glass case. It is lit by a single soft light. Inside the case, on a piece of dark velvet, sits a small, hand-stitched leather pouch. The pouch that started it all. Sometimes, Leo will walk into the office late at night. He will stand in front of the case. He will look at the pouch, and he will remember the feel of that first half-pound of seed in his hand. He will remember the certainty in Frank Miller's eyes. He will remember the quiet resolve he felt in the workshop. The physical artifact is not just a reminder of the past. It is a promise for the future. A promise that the land remembers. A promise that value is not always what can be measured. A promise that the most powerful thing you can do is believe in something that the world has forgotten. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is being told they can't. Someone is standing in front of a desk, or a loan officer, or a boss, and they are being kindly, reasonably, and logically told that their idea is worthless, that there is no system for it, that it's not worth the truck ride. That person has a choice. They can accept that certainty. They can walk away. They can plow it under. Or they can do what Leo Gallo did. They can go home, find their own mill, find their own starter, and build their own system, one loaf of bread at a time. This story is for them, the quiet ones, the ones who choose the lonely work, the ones who understand that the greatest innovations are often just acts of remembering. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to this channel. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life who refused to be dismissed, share it with them. And in the comments below, tell us, what is the good seed that you refuse to let the world forget? Because the land remembers, and so should we.